Good morning, everyone. I'm Charles Allen, the Ward 6 council member and chair of the council's Committee on Transportation and the Environment. Today is Thursday, January 15th, 2026, and we are meeting both in room 120 of the John A. Wilson building as well as on the Zoom virtual platform. The time is now 10:09 a.m. and I'm calling to order this public roundtable of the committee. Today, the committee will be considering one measure, PR 26-360, the Green Finance Authority Board Edward Hubbard Confirmation Resolution of 2025. Chairman Mendelson introduced PR 26-360 at the request of the mayor on October 28, 2025. PR 26-360 would appoint Edward Hubbard to the Green Finance Authority for a term to end June 4th, 2028. Mr. Hubbard currently serves as the secretary for the DC Green Finance Authority Board, having been confirmed by the council in 2019 and again in 2022 for a full term. For some quick background, the District of Columbia Green Finance Authority, otherwise known as the DC Green Bank, was established in 2018. This made DC the first city in the United States to establish a green bank with the mission of providing access to capital to grow the DC clean economy and to develop a more equitable, resilient, and sustainable district. The bank offers innovative financing solutions for this purpose and focuses its investments on solar energy, greener and more efficient buildings, infrastructure, resilience, and transportation electrification. Within that area, the DC Green Bank has leveraged $84 million in local funding into $884 million in unlocked investments since its inception. This reflects a ratio of more than 8.5 times the capital invested by the district. Just in the last year, the DC Green Bank has created thousands of jobs, increased annual solar energy production, and reduced annual emissions in the district by 21,000 metric tons, or around the annual energy usage of 3,000 homes. The DC Green Bank is governed by the Green Finance Authority Board, which consists of 11 members. Of those members, 4 are non-voting and include representatives from various relevant agencies and the executive office of the mayor. The 7 voting members are appointed by the mayor, are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council. These members include 2 members with experience at a financial institution operating within the district, 3 members with expertise in clean energy, clean infrastructure, clean transportation, stormwater management, or green infrastructure, and 2 members with experience in affordable housing or community development. We don't have any public witnesses that were registered for today's roundtable, so I'm going to turn directly to our nominee. For anyone who is interested in submitting testimony for the record, the committee will accept written testimony through the council's hearing management system at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings until the close of business tomorrow, January 16th. With that housekeeping out of the way, let us turn to our nominee. So, Mr. Edward Hubbard, if you'll please join us at the table. And our rules require that all government witnesses be sworn in. So I'm going to give you your oath. I'm going to turn it over to you to help share your testimony, and then we'll jump into some questions. So if you'll please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony that you're about to give to the Committee on Transportation and the Environment is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Excellent. Good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us. If you'll push the button so the red light comes on, that'll turn the mic on. And then I will turn it over to you for your testimony.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Allen and members of the committee. My name is Ed Hubbard, and I appear before you today with profound gratitude and honor as you consider my nomination for reappointment as board member of the District of Columbia's Green Finance Authority Board. I want to begin by thanking Mayor Bowser for renominating me to this board and this council for your visionary commitment to establishing the DC Green Bank as a critical financing mechanism for our city's climate goals. I've had the privilege of serving on this board since its founding in 2020, playing a central role in DC Green Bank's remarkable evolution from concept to one of the nation's most impactful green banks. Throughout my tenure on the board, I have consistently sought to provide strong and effective leadership through various positions: board secretary, executive committee member, and governance committee chair, working diligently to strengthen our institutional framework and advance our mission. In June 2025, the board appointed me acting board chair following the departure of our previous chair, Brandy Colander, who transitioned to serve as interim president. Under my stewardship these past months, I have ensured seamless leadership continuity, maintained operational excellence, and guided the organization through a critical transition period. I'm proud that Ms. Colander was ultimately selected as our permanent president and CEO in October 2025, and our collaborative working relationship continues to drive the organization forward. My appointment to this board was specifically designed to fulfill the statutory requirement for clean energy policy expertise. I bring over 3 decades of distinguished federal policy experience with nearly 20 years dedicated exclusively to energy and clean energy policy development and advocacy. My expertise spans clean energy modeling, tax policy formulation and implementation, and critically, international clean energy trade, export policy, and finance mechanisms. This specialized knowledge has proven invaluable in positioning the DC Green Bank competitively with the national green finance landscape and securing strategic partnerships that amplify our impact. As a practicing attorney with more than 25 years of business and legal experience, I possess the technical acumen necessary to navigate complex regulatory environments and financial structures. Since 2011, I've served as general counsel for the Renewable Fuels Association, a national trade association where I oversee board governance, regulatory compliance, antitrust matters, and legal strategy. This dual expertise in policy development and organizational governance ensures the board operates with exemplary fiduciary responsibility while pursuing its ambitious programmatic innovation. My leadership capacity extends beyond my work at the DC Green Bank. Since September 2020, I've served as board member of Green Seal, a global nonprofit that sets science-based standards and certifies products, services, and spaces for sustainability and performance. As a result of effective leadership on that board, I was appointed board secretary, executive committee co-chair, and co-chair of the audit committee, roles that further deepen my capacity to lead complex environmental finance organizations through periods of growth and evolution. During my tenure, the DC Green Bank has achieved extraordinary growth from committing $2 million in our first year to more than $80 million invested across all 8 wards. In fiscal year 2025 alone, the $25 million we deployed catalyzed more than $200 million in additional investment, creating an 8-fold strategic leadership focused on 4 core investment areas: solar energy, energy efficient buildings, stormwater infrastructure, and clean transportation, while deliberately integrating mayoral priorities, including affordable housing, energy equity, local job creation, and small business support. Projects like Faircliff Plaza East, the Howard Theater, and Sycamore and Oak just demonstrate how strategic governance translates vision into tangible community benefits. As permanent board chair, I am committed to building upon this strong foundation while accelerating our impact. My institutional knowledge from 5 years of service, combined with my policy expertise, governance experience, and demonstrated commitment to the DC Green Bank's mission, uniquely positioned me to guide this board through its next chapter of growth and impact. The DC Green Bank stands at a pivotal moment where the urgency of climate action demands expanded reach, deeper partnerships, and ensuring that every district resident and business can access the financial tools needed to participate in our city's clean energy future. I am ready, willing, and eager to provide the strategic leadership necessary to achieve these goals. I thank you for your consideration and welcome the questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hubbard. I appreciate that. And as for all of our nominees, thank you for willing to put yourself forward again. So let me start there. You have been actually on the board since its foundation.
Since its foundation, yes.
And I wanted to ask you if you could talk through, as a board member, what have you seen as some of the growing pains getting started, first few years, standing up the Green Finance Authority, being able to reflect back now on a few terms and kind of from the foundation, what are some of the ways you've seen the Green Bank overcome some of those growing pains, or what were some of the growing pains you feel like you had to focus on?
The growing pain, the initial growing pain of being a startup is first and foremost. Initially, what I think the challenge was for us was to establish it in a way that it sets it up as a model where we're able to be effective, but also at the same time try to learn from your mistakes. I think we've been able to accomplish that. I think one of the big challenges that we've had is consistency in leadership. I think that has been one of the biggest challenges for the Green Bank. Certainly having a broad portfolio that focuses on the targets that we haven't been, kind of instructed to focus on. I think we've been very successful in doing that. One of the things that I've been most focused on is making sure that the benefits inure to the entire DC community, in particular those communities that need those financial assistance means and mechanisms the most. We are an organization that's meant to fill gaps, not necessarily crowd out financing, but encourage financing. And I think one of the initial challenges is getting our message out there, being known as an entity that can actually provide assistance to needy entities, communities, families, and making sure that they understand the value of what we bring to the table. One of those examples of that is the Howard Theater project that we worked on, and so I'm very proud of that one, only because that was a deal that arguably came during a conversation about an HVAC that maybe we could do something, that would not just deal with the issue, but also make it a model for other projects around. And that's really, I think, been the challenge, kind of getting the community to understand what we do, but also getting the community willing to come in and work with us and talk with us and engage with us on how we can actually help some of their goals, as well as some of the climate goals that our city and our residents have to deal with every day.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I agree that we want people to know and need more people to know what the Green Bank does and how it works and the successes that it's had. Mm-hmm. Sometimes success begets success, and so having more examples to point to helps out. But I know, in the same way you're talking about having more people know about the opportunities there. Frankly, many of my own colleagues weren't really quite sure what the Green Bank did. And over the last couple of years, the Green Bank's made very intentional outreach. I think it needs to continue to do that so that members understand what it's doing, what it's delivering, why those investments are important. So I appreciate the staff work from the Green Bank team that's helped make a lot of that happen over the last couple of years.
Absolutely.
But we need to continue to do that.
Absolutely.
All right. So help me understand too, so you have served as the secretary of the board. You are also, but correct me if I'm wrong here, you're also acting as the acting chair of the board.
That's correct.
And how long have you been in that dual role?
Since June of this year. Our previous president and CEO had decided to resign, and we were arguably, and it was kind of without a whole lot of runway to come up with an alternative. Our previous board chair, Brandy Colander, put herself certainly into the was willing to stand in the gap there in order to try to maintain the consistency of leadership. Ultimately, and when that occurred, there was certainly an opening. I guess certainly the board's decision to appoint me as interim had a lot to do with my willingness to stand up when and lead in certain areas where we needed them. I've had obviously a tremendous amount of experience and had served in a general counsel capacity with a number of other with the Renewable Fuels Association. So there was some natural tendencies there to select me as interim and acting board chair while our then current board chair was acting as interim. That has now changed. She's now permanent president, and it is the board's intention to have me become a permanent board chair of the committee. And certainly I would argue, I think that has a lot to do with my willingness to serve and my ability, but also the consistency and institutional knowledge there. I think that's part of it.
Is the expectation that the reason why you are still in an acting chair capacity is that the term that you're in right now expires, and so while you've been renominated for a new term, correct me if I'm wrong here, the way that I'm hearing this say is you think the board is essentially waiting to ensure that you have another term, then that's when you would move from an interim chair to a permanent.
No, I think there was some, confusion as to how ultimately the decision was made. I think when we initially began, the statute indicates that the mayor would appoint or at least nominate someone to serve as the board chair, which would be confirmed by the council. It is my understanding that requirement it may not be actually correct, that once that was only related to the initial standing up of the board, but the board's position with respect to me being permanent board chair, we have operated as if this was a requirement for that would have to be confirmed by the council. So okay. I think from a perspective of the board's decision, they are anticipating me being board chair, but not because of any decision to wait or delay. I think the board was more inclined to wait until the council acted and was able to confirm.
Got it. Okay. When we look at the totality of board members, so there are a total of 11 board members,
Absolutely.
7 that fill different voting capacities, 4 that are non-voting. Can you talk about your relationship with all those board members, both your voting and non-voting? You are colleagues, obviously, as board members. I'm going to wager not every decision is unanimous.
No.
And so you've got to manage the relationship.
Yes.
And certainly moving into the interim chair and chair, you've got to manage all of those colleagues. So can you talk a little about your relationship? How do you manage disagreements? How do you manage maybe different push and pull of your fellow board members?
I'm glad you asked that. I think one of the things that I've learned over my years of working as general counsel for boards and engaging with boards, I think the most effective boards are those that operate under a consensus basis. You can win a vote by a simple majority of the 7 voting members, but when you want to vote in a board that operates with resilience, with commitment, I think that every board member needs to be heard. That includes those that don't have voting rights. I mean, obviously, those 4 non-voting members have a voice there. And I think that the most effective board decisions are ones that do not have a great deal of dissent and ultimately don't impact future decision-making. And so one of my mantras, at least and one of the commitments that I made to myself when I was elevated to acting board chair and being considered for permanent board chair was to maintain that goal of consensus decision making. Now that requirement does create some challenges when you have to make a quick decision. It requires a little more lobbying. You may have to spend a little more time on the phone with one of your or 2 of your colleagues and convince them, or at least make sure that their voice is heard and is reflected in ultimately whatever decision you make. So I think that really drives how I have and intend to continue to lead as chair of the board. I have a wonderful relationship with those. We have an interesting, very, very interesting group. I like how there is a separation of the experts, where we do have affordable housing experts, and they have been very effective. We have banking experts, and everybody has a vote on essentially everybody in my viewpoint. So I engage, but I also look for them for expertise. I think that's really what a board chair needs to do. I serve as with one of those categories being the great deal of my experience, but I'm always looking to learn from my other colleagues on the committee. And we have a really effective group of board members. There has been some movement with some of the those additional members on the board, and every time they come to the board, I make sure that I have an opportunity to sit down and talk with them. So It's the engagement, I think, and the willingness to listen to them that I think has garnered a great deal of appreciation from my other members of the board. And I think that also has a lot to do with why I was selected to serve as interim, as acting, and then ultimately being elevated to permanent.
Got it. All right. Thank you. Certainly being a member of a body that votes a lot, there's a lot done by consensus, even though it may not always seem that way. I would say probably 98% of all our votes are unanimous. There's a lot of consensus that happens. But I think we also see votes that are not consensus can also be defining moments. They can be pivotal decisions that change direction or help set direction. It's nice when it's unanimous, but I also know that there's sometimes when a decision, there is no amount of lobbying, there's no amount of cajoling, there's no amount of compromise that's going to get there, or there are defining moments when something shouldn't be watered down just for compromise for the sake of compromise, right? So can you talk about your approach of when those moments come that yes, it's nice to get everybody on board, but sometimes you actually end up watering something down just for the sake of getting a compromise rather than that decision that needs to get made.
Well,
how do you help address that? How do you philosophically go into decisions like that?
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with how the decision making occurs. I think you can get to the point where you have a consensus decision that may not be watered down, so to speak. I mean, there's consensus, and then there's compromise to the extent where we're walking away. Okay, you know, you want 50%, he wants 100%. We're going to split the baby at 75. That's generally not necessarily where effective leadership comes from. I think we have some core initiatives and some core goals that we look to. I have no problem. I think certainly I've been appreciative that a lot of the decisions that we've made have been very strong consensus decisions. But I think that there is an understanding with the board as well as with my fellow board members that that certainly my leadership is not meant to just simply be a rubber stamp or a pushover for decision making. We have not gotten to the point, at least not yet, to the point where we've got a really split vote where there's active opposition on both sides. I certainly am happy to deal with that situation when it comes to us. I think a lot of that can be avoided simply by focusing on our and paying attention to our core goals and our core objectives. But I'm not willing to jeopardize or compromise core objectives for the sake of agreement. I think that's really the most important thing, to have a principled board chair that sees into the future and ultimately is, not looking 3 and 4 moves ahead. When I say consensus decision, I don't necessarily mean everybody's on kumbaya. I think the consensus decision is knowing that person's point has been made, knowing that person's point has been appreciated, and then we are somehow addressing that in something else, whether it's this measure, whatever the particular measure that we're dealing with, or some other measure going forward. So I think engagement and openness has allowed us to avoid those split votes. I don't think we've had a single very tight vote like that because we've maintained focus on really core objectives.
Okay. All right. Thank you. You shared a couple times your role as general counsel for Renewable Fuels Association, serving previously board member of Green Seal. Can you talk a little about where you see potential overlap in your role with other organizations and then your role with DC Green Bank? And then if you can also talk about in your professional capacities there, are there potential conflicts? How do you address and assess? And any examples you want to share?
Yeah, I don't think there. One of the things that was of initial concern when I was initially appointed to this board was my role as general counsel and government affairs, VP of government affairs for the Renewable Fuels Association. And one of the concerns at that time from in my initial nomination was that I would be putting my thumb on the scale for biofuel. And the concern was that, well, biofuel is not necessarily as clean as we want to be. We should be talking about the cleanest energy policy there. And if you select an individual who is engaged with clean energy, but not the cleanest of energy, you're jeopardizing your clean energy mission. Well, I completely discounted that argument in large part because I was brought to the board for my expertise in clean energy policy. And what I made sure that I understood that the council understood at that time was that a lot of the work that I do is fungible. In clean energy policy, whether you're dealing with wind energy or whether you're dealing with solar energy or you're dealing with liquid fuels or EV policy, there are a number of fungible skills as well as ability that so the overlap, I would argue, benefits policymaking. But more importantly, what I said at that time was, I actually read the statute front to back. And that's one of the things that I first learned in my practice of law, but more importantly, in the work that I did in analyzing policy. And the statute itself indicates that the Green Bank has a limited number of clean energy sources that they can tap into, in large part based on what's available to us. We're not in the middle of a desert and wind blowing at, thousands of miles per hour. So wind energy is not included, although it's a very viable clean energy. Solar, we have solar and geothermal that are justified and at least identified in the statute. One of the concerns was that, in response to the question whether or not I would put my thumb on the scale in favor of liquid fuels or biofuels, they are not even included. I said one of the most important things was that by reading the statute, those clean energy sources are not included. We can't, even if I wanted to, I couldn't do that. So I think that there is an overlap from the policy standpoint, but not necessarily an overlap from a parochial interest, right? And I think one of the things that also allows an overlap but not a conflict is an understanding of the fuel system. Certainly one of the areas that I really want to make sure that we are able to have some growth in is in electrification of transportation. That certainly would seem to be counterintuitive for a biofuel advocate. But in reality, all of the clean energies kind of work together. It's an interesting concept. When I did a lot of tax policy work before Congress, the clean energies work together because they tend to work in opposition or in competition of legacy and incumbent energy interests, more carbon intensive interests like that. So we tend to work together on behalf of clean energy in general. So I do think there's the overlap that occurs is more of an overlap. We're providing fungible skills and less of an overlap concerning conflict of interest. And I too have children. And I want my children to grow up in a clean environment. I want them to grow up with clean air and clean water. And certainly I have a broad enough viewpoint and perspective on the world to know that my small little portion of it is not relevant to everything, but it is relevant to the whole fight toward clean, sustainable energy and energy efficiency. And that's really what I think is helpful. My work on Green Seal is really about safety in homes, safety for employees. A lot of what we do, and you'll see when you go to Home Depot and you'll go buy some cleaner, and it's made with orange essence, citrus essence, and it's got a little stamp, and you are cleaning a building, and instead of using toxic chemicals to clean the building. We make sure that we're looking at sustainable but also safe. And I think some of that also, some of the skills and some of the networking that is ultimately used in order to kind of build those programmatic efforts are also fungible, I think, with respect to what we're trying to do. And that same breath, we're trying to get the word out to as many folks to understand that clean and sustainable living not just includes the air, but also includes, what you're using to clean your house, what you're using to clean your buildings, what sort of materials are being used. You're not using toxic materials when you're building buildings and places where people have to live and work. So I think a lot of those skills are fungible, but I don't think they're in conflict. And I think that's really been the most benefit from me being part of those other entities. And I think I've tried to bring some of that expertise to my work here at the Green Bank.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Let me turn a little bit to the maybe a sticky issue. All right. You're the mayor's nominee. All right. We have a mayor's administration that still hasn't transferred the $3.5 million that are supposed to go to the Green Bank. They're holding that up and not allowing those dollars to get to the Green Bank. We have a mayor's administration for the last several budgets has attempted to cut and defund the Green Bank. The council has fought hard to restore those funds because we see the return on investment, and we know that we are leveraging a lot more private money and creating jobs and opportunities and doing the things that we want by fighting to restore those funds. But we have an administration that has not prioritized and valued the way that I would like to see, and has actively worked to take funds away from the Green Bank or not transfer those that are legally supposed to be going there. So as the mayor's nominee, how do you see your role to be able to both serve the responsibilities you have on the board, but also be an advocate for the DC Green Bank to ensure that it's got the funding, the supports, and the structures necessary for it to be successful, to be able to leverage those private dollars and do all the things that we're very proud of and have talked about today that the Green Bank does?
Well, the biggest push, or at least feather in our cap with respect to that effort, is the work that we've done. I'd like to focus on the successes that we've been able to accomplish. You have also a federal administration that has completely turned away from clean energy to an extent. What I think is most important, I think, was one of the drivers of this effort to establish the Green Bank, was the one to establish a Green Bank that was effective, but also was able to stand on its own. I do understand that there are other budgetary challenges that ultimately can certainly affect our charge and our ability to meet the needs. But I think that the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do is establish us to the extent that we're able to operate without the complete reliance on certainly public financing. But I think more importantly, the way that you get around that, certainly at least until we are able to completely stand up this and be an independent, self-sustaining entity, it is our successes. The mayor has been focused on affordable housing. We've tried our best to help that effort. We are doing our best to be an effective community leader. Certainly, I have no concern or hesitancy about speaking the gospel of the Green Bank to this administration or any future administrations. I think that, and you certainly know it, Mr. Chairman, this Green Bank I don't know anybody that hates the Green Bank. I mean, I think everybody speaks very positively about what the work that we've been able to do. So I think our biggest weapon in that fight to make sure that those dollars stay in place is the successes that we have. And that's really where I've been focusing on, trying to make sure that our successes are not just well known, but also shared with leadership that in order in advance for them to make a decision. But I think ultimately we have to, in order to be very effective as a green bank, we have to start thinking about self-sustaining the green bank. It was not just about setting it up. It was about making this an entity that can continue to provide these services as certainly a profit-making enterprise. We were able to not just make a profit, but also reinvest it back into the work that we're doing. So I want to continue to fight for those funds. I do think that those are critical funds. Losing those federal dollars was very painful. Or access to those federal dollars was very painful. But more importantly, I think the goal and my charge, as well as the charge of our president, is to make this self-sustaining so that we are not continuing coming to the council and with our hands out saying we need a certain amount of infusion in order to continue to do our business.
I'm going to push you a little bit on this one.
Okay.
So yes, federal money, that's a problem. I'm focused on our local right now.
Yeah. No.
And the goal is ultimately for the Green Bank to be self-sustaining. It is not yet.
No.
And there is no expectation that it's going to be tomorrow. We have appropriated funding that is supposed to be going to the Green Bank that's not getting there. We have a SETF that was supposed to be putting $7 million in annually. We're now down to 3.5. And then again, locked away and still not getting over it. I understand it's a little sticky nature being the mayor's nominee here, but I do want to push you on this. How do you use your voice and your seat to be able to advocate, not just showing the successes, but you got money that's due to you right now?
Well, you've got to demand
right?
it.
So how are you doing that to both, obviously, your fiduciary responsibility as the board, but also to the administration to say, there is a legally appropriated budget. There are funds that are supposed to be coming down. Give us our money so we can do the successes and help achieve the things that we know the Green Bank does.
And I think I don't have a problem certainly speaking my mind to the mayor. I've spoken with her on multiple occasions with respect to that. I do also think that, certainly it goes beyond certainly the mayor and working with you as well, that we are working a full court press to make sure that those monies are there. We certainly have no objection to making those requests to the administration and imploring that those funds are preserved. But we do know that there are certain budgetary issues, and that ultimately may rise above our pay grade and have to be decided by the council as well as in conjunction with the mayor in making those determinations. But certainly continuing to work with you, certainly so that you can make sure our voice is being heard, not just one voice coming from the mayor. And the mayor appointed me, I think, giving with an understanding that I wasn't her rubber stamp, that I initially was bringing an expertise to the table and an understanding of a strong fiduciary responsibility. So I have no objections whatsoever and no hesitancy whatsoever in speaking to this administration and imploring upon them that this is a critical need, but certainly the work has to be buttressed with the work and the help of our champions, not just with the mayor's office, but also this council.
Excellent. Thank you. I want to spend a second to just again, board role. If you can help walk us through as a board, both as the secretary and now as the interim chair.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a responsibility. You talked about more consistent or sustainable leadership.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Making sure we have that is important. And I think probably my hunch is it's a little challenging as well, just in a sector that is kind of often on the leading edge of a lot of markets. I mean, we don't have lots of green banks. It is still kind of a leading edge sector that I'm really proud of the district in terms of where we are and at the forefront. So it's not entirely unnatural to me that we would see leadership have opportunities to maybe go somewhere else, and we're trying to attract, right? So I don't think we're at a place where we're going to look for someone who's going to be sitting in a seat for 15
Oh,
years,
absolutely.
right? We're going to see some turnover. So that's a little bit natural and normal. But can you talk a little bit about the board's process? And part of what I was curious about is when I looked back at the way the board functioned in terms of when Tricia Miller came on, the board had an interim director, or whatever my correct terminology would be, interim CEO, director for a period of time, and then brought on our previous director, Tricia. And then we bring in an interim, and then we change that to a permanent now.
Okay.
What was similar in those two experiences? What was different in those two experiences? Since you sat through all of it.
Through all that. Our first the president who ultimately left, it led to that first situation, ended up going to a national green bank. This was at a time right after the Inflation Reduction Act was passed. It was a very positive situation out there. There was Senator Chris Van Hollen's dream of a national green bank was actually coming to the forefront. There was opportunity there. We saw that first president leave, but it wasn't a leaving of the industry. It was really about growing. If you look at that situation, if you saw that our president had gone, our past president had gone and become number 2 at the National Green Bank, that would have been co-venture opportunities. It was certainly something that was looked at completely different. We at that point were looking for somebody. Our interim at that point, Gene, was really a placeholder. I mean, it was not. I think that was the understanding from the outset that we were going to ultimately. This was a great opportunity for Eli to take helm and have leadership at the National Green Bank, and we were going to spend some time to actually identify someone to come in that second spot. So I think that we as a board looked at it as an opportunity to find even more effective leadership, right? We had Eli come in, and he certainly did a phenomenal job in helping us get set up, and ultimately was promoted to a National Green Bank situation. So now we needed to fill that position with somebody just as dynamic. So I think that interim situation was a real interim placeholder-like situation. I don't think any of us on the board saw Gene it was just to get through the process and finding someone. And understand that at that time we had spent a great deal of time identifying Eli and saw an opportunity hit him. And we were very pleased about that opportunity, but we wanted to make sure that we did the same amount of search for that individual as we would do for that person's replacement. So that was a real interim placeholder situation. One thing, the difference about Brandy's elevation in this situation is we already have worked with her for a year and have seen what she's been able to do and kind of saw the leadership. And so we didn't have to do a long search process. The interim part of it now, I think what the board decided was we're not putting her in interim as a placeholder. We want to put her in interim so that we can talk with her about potentially taking this on. I think from the perspective of when Brandy offered her name up as interim, from the board's perspective, we all looked at each other and said, okay, what can we do to convince her to take this permanently? Which is a completely different situation, I think, than what was on the other situation. We had a true placeholder looking for somebody. I think what we were saying is we would be benefited if the Green Bank would be benefited greatly if someone like Brandy was able to stay in a permanent position there. As opposed to someone like that. So I think, and from the board's perspective, we all looked at it as an opportunity to not have to do a full national search. We already knew this, it was a very known commodity. We knew that there was qualifications there. We knew all of that all the boxes would be checked just perfectly. Now it was an effort to what can we do to make you sure that you're willing to stay. Certainly it would be an easier transition if we had more institutional knowledge that stayed there, as opposed to find somebody kind of out of the blue, maybe from somewhere else, not really an unknown commodity or an untested commodity, but somebody we would have to ultimately identify, vet, and then ultimately retain. So I think this was that the transition. They were two completely different transitions. One actually was a placeholder, and the other was an opportunity. I think I would view that
Okay.
a placeholder versus a tremendous opportunity.
And I'll note, I remember my conversations with Ms. Miller as she was leaving, spoke very highly of and was feeling very confident by having Ms. Colander step up in
That's
the
right.
interim capacity.
That's right. That's right.
But so I want to make sure that's noted.
Yeah.
If I'm hearing correctly, though, there was no search process, though, of moving from an interim to a permanent.
No, when we decided to go with the current process.
Yes.
No, we did not have a search process. Tricia nominated Brandy to fill her space. And when she was walking out as board chair, when she announced at one of our board meetings, I'm leaving, I've decided to move in a different direction. Tricia was very vocal in who she thought ultimately could help in that situation.
And as I noted, she shared that with me as well. Felt very confident in that transition. What I was trying to make sure, I sit on boards as well. So for example, with the Council of Governments, when we were going through leadership change, we had interims. We also went through a big search process. I was on that search committee. I know how, it takes a lot of time. It's a lot of work, a lot of thought that goes into it. So my experience of going through that is through that search committee process, a search for folks, which sometimes there's folks that are right in front of you, and those are going to be really good choices. And then you also hear other people that kind of round out what that selection process was. And that's what I'm trying to get at. The board, in this case, as the interim chair, you felt like you had the interim that you wanted and felt
that
you had
the board, that the board,
so you didn't go through a search process.
We didn't go through a full-fledged search process because certainly the members of the board all had complete confidence in the transition. I mean, it's certainly when you talk about consensus, not just consensus, it was certainly the desire of every member of that board to not only to trust our knowledge and our I think our instinct with respect to Brandy, but also understanding and appreciating the drawn out process of and the impact of a full blown search. Certainly, we were focused more on preserving the continuity and making sure that the Green Bank continued to be effective. We were concerned that, we're in a situation where this was right around the time that the administration was, looking away from green banks. There was certainly we believe that there had to be a focus on moving quickly and shoring it up. We had a number of, certainly we were in the process of maintaining deals and didn't need or felt that a long drawn out process could ultimately jeopardize a number of those deals and some of those efforts. And as I said before, there was a great deal of confidence in the board. I mean, we've gone through searches before, a number of searches before with respect to previous heads. And understand at that time, I believe Jane had withdrew her name from the process. So I mean, it was, we certainly had to identify someone else, even though Jane was interim. But I think that the board had a focus on trying to make sure that we didn't do harm to the bank. And we had a number of, and that certainly I would argue, as I believe that's probably exactly what Tricia talked about with her decision to appoint, that there was so much on the table that needed to be resolved, and so much in jeopardy that there was a value in focusing on a known commodity as opposed to pursuing a full-blown search. We had done that before and ultimately couldn't guarantee at this time that we would get, the candidate, given the kind of the attitude toward green banks at right around 6 months into the current Trump administration. So I think there's value. I think that the value that Ms. Colander brought to the board in serving in that permanent capacity was that the ease of transition without because even with a search, I think there is some risk in identifying someone who's either not willing to serve for any period of time or may have some issues. Then one of the other issues that we also have to deal with is staff retention. I mean, it is not just I think when you start having a lot of movement at the top, it begets movement at the bottom, and it is harder to identify talent and keep talent. And I think that was also a consideration that we had to make. We cannot have continuous turnover. We have to make sure that we're attracting this is a bank. I mean, essentially it's a financial institution, and we have to realize that we can't pay Wall Street prices for candidates. So we have to make sure that we get more bang for the buck. That we bring someone who is well-heeled, locally understands the concept of what we're doing and has a commitment to the effort locally as well as from a policy standpoint. So I think all of those boxes were checked as it relates to Mrs. Colander. And so I think the focus of the board, not just myself, but the entire board, was the value in preserving and not jeopardizing the good work that we've been able to do. So I think that that's probably the most important factor that we considered.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We got a couple of last questions and we'll start wrapping up. When we think about the success of the Green Bank and the projects, is there a space where you, the board, the staff, one of the things I think often happens is people say, I don't want to make an investment in a project, be it energy efficiency, be it solar, because there's an upfront cost. But we see the savings on the back end and we see what it means. I'll use one example that the Green Bank is a integral part of. New building going up in the Noma neighborhood where Green Bank helped actually do the gap financing, is making that project actually happen. It's going to deliver a good number of affordable homes. And the choices that were made that weren't going to happen, but for, I think, the Green Bank financing, yes, create an investment on the front end, but are going to end up reducing utility costs, for example, for working families, seniors on a fixed income in affordable homes by 30, maybe even 40%. It's a key part of affordability long-term.
Absolutely.
How's the Green Bank, how are you helping tell that story around the fact that don't blink because there is an upfront first-time investment. You are going to see that savings. You are going to see those efficiencies gained. How do you help use your voice and seat on the Green Bank to help make sure people understand why that investment takes place in the first time?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the good work. I think a lot of the work that we've been able to do around the PACE program really is kind of speaks a lot to what you're talking about. Not just upfront costs, but who can actually make the upfront investment and who benefits from it ultimately. And you are asking under a program where you've got a landlord who may not see a value at least not benefit as much from the savings entirely. And a lot of it goes to the tenants. I think really where I see the work being helped is our work in that PACE program process and those successes there. My voice is just one as board chair. I think that we as a Green Bank focus on all of the team kind of speaking from the hymnal and speaking as to those values. That is this challenge that we have is getting folks to commit to make that ultimate investment. That was really where the Howard Theater situation came up. I can tell you right now, Chip Ellis was not willing to make that investment. That investment would not have occurred. I mean, it was, I've got this problem with an HVAC. I got to deal with it. And that voice really But that's even different. That's kind of individual. That's one company dealing with kind of an internal issue and having to make that decision. The challenge that you're talking about also is making a strong investment that where all those benefits aren't necessarily coming to your bottom line. They may be going to your tenants, and ultimately you've got to at least explain to them that there's a value in lowering the cost for their tenants as well, and maintaining tenants longer, longevity of tenants, and the like, and certainly it is voicing the value of, that's very difficult to voice the value of resilience, right? What is the value of environmental resilience? What is the value of certainly an investment where a solar energy farm is placed on top of a building due to and which ultimately will benefit the residents more, I think, than potentially the individual making the investment. So I think our role is obviously to make the case for the savings, and to make the case for why a value of savings going to a tenant and to a community and to residents will also ultimately impact you as the landlord, tenant owner, and building owner.
To me, that's a big part of the kind of the bully pulpit that you get to have.
Yeah.
And I think that's crucial because as a policymaker, I'm not looking at just, does it pencil out?
Yeah.
I am looking at the affordability for the tenant, which is not going to be a benefit that accrues to the landlord per se, but as a policymaker, if I'm being asked to put public investment into something, a green bank, I think you have a great story to tell of the work that's been done by the green bank in examples like that.
Yeah.
As a policymaker, I will be motivated to continue to support my green bank when I hear about how I am dropping utility costs for that senior on a fixed income.
That's right.
For that grandmother who's trying to help raise the grandkids, for that working family that's just trying to get by, right? So I think that the more that the green bank is able to help tell that story, it's not just about, does the ledger balance out?
Yeah.
Let me show you that. That's an important part of the story, and I want to make sure I'll keep telling that story, but I want to make sure
I agree completely.
you're preaching from the same same place.
Yeah.
All right. If confirmed, this term would expire in June 2028. So that's 2.5 years from now.
Yep.
So tell me what does a successful term look like to you? Roll that clock forward 2.5 years. What would you say are some of the things you want to be most proud to be able to say, we accomplished this on the board, we helped the Green Bank accomplish this over the next 2 years?
If you look at the period of time that we've been engaged, you can see that the performance in this fiscal year 2025 outshines every previous year. And I want to continue that process. I want to make sure that not only are we establishing products, but we are also bringing not just certain sectors success, but make sure that it's broad success across all sectors of what we do. That the PACE work expands. The work that one of the more challenging areas has been electrification and trying to solve that infrastructure problem, but doing it in a way that's creative and innovative. What I'd like to see is more balanced engagement across all sectors, but I'd like to also see that exponential growth that's in the latter years of what we do to be allowed to continue. If I view myself at the end of 2028, I want to make sure that I'd like to see those numbers triple, and the amount of the work that we've been able to do. But I want them done I don't want there to be a sector of what we do that just simply is not either tended to or just kind of falls by the wayside. I think we've got an obligation across all the types of work that we do and all the communities that we assist. I want to make sure that those benefits go to some of the more needy wards and citizens. I do not want to crowd out financial investment. That's the worst thing I want to do. But I also want to make sure that we are part of the solution where we're fighting against capital leaving the city as well. We want to make sure that we are one of the drivers that encourage financing to stay and continue to invest in
You could
Washington,
tee up a
D.C.
great story you could just share about a way in which the Green Bank helped make that happen.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So, um, yes, I want to see us continue to grow, but I want that growth to be not just de minimis. I want I want to continue the process, the progress that we've been able to make. I think a lot of that has to do with the teams, the team being built out, the team that we've built out so far, uh, um, and the message that we've been able to share across the city regarding what we provide and make available to building owners, but also homeowners and business leaders, as well as residents and tenants. But my goal by 2020, I'd like to see us doing a lot more work in the electrification space. I have to be honest with you. And it has nothing to do with it's just that I know the transportation industry and I know some of the huge challenges, and I'd like to leave a mark on that for this city. But more importantly, I want to make sure that I'm helping and enabling the Green Bank to continue the good work that it's done in the more recent years, in particular FY 2025. I'm excited about working toward 2028, but more toward making sure 2026 is just as robust as 2027 is robust, not just necessarily the end, but more the process. I tell my son this. My son plays ball all the time, and college basketball, and I tell him, don't focus on the end, focus on the process, getting there, because that's really where the development happens. And if you're able to focus on the day to day and the progress, and make sure that you're hitting those spots and hitting those needs that you need to do, that by the end you will be where you need to be. And so it's think about the future, but think more about next steps, initial steps. And I think that we try to do that every day at the Green Bank.
All right. Excellent. Thank you. Well, again, appreciate your service thus far, and being willing to put yourself back up there again. You might be a glutton, but appreciate it. All right. I don't have any further questions. If we do have any further questions, or if a colleague has one, we know how to reach you, and we can get those so you can submit answers and all of that. But thank you very much for your time. So this is going to conclude the committee's public roundtable on proposed resolution PR 26-360. Again, thanks to our nominee for your testimony. The record for today's roundtable will close tomorrow, January 16th, the close of business. And so you can submit written testimony again through the council's hearing management system at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings. Until then, the next scheduled meeting of the committee is on January 28th, 2026. The committee will be holding its first performance oversight hearing of the year, starting with public witnesses testifying about the District Department of Transportation. I look forward to a very long day on January 28th. There being no further business for the committee, the time is now 11:11 a.m. and this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.
Yes, yeah, that was good. That was good. That was perfect. That's perfect. Appreciate it. Yeah, that bike, man. Stay on and off.